kind of means that, we can't always observe the way he works, even though the way he works is manifesting itself. So there's a lot that Allah does that is subtle, not known to us, right? But it's happening, but it's facilitating things. Things are going on. Things are happening.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome again for our next episode of Quranic Transformation. We are continuing with our special guest, Brother Iqbal Naseem, and let's continue on.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. How could he not know his own creation? For he alone is the most subtle, all aware. It's worth just looking at the other translation here. Should not he who has created know? So this first part of the verse can be understood in a couple of different ways, depending on how you think that this sort of grammatically, you're supposed to make sense of it. So there's two kind of options, right? I mean, ultimately the implication is similar, the same. But following on from the previous verse where Allah is saying, look, regardless of whether you lower your voices or raise them, he is aware of, what everything your hearts or your chest contain, let alone obviously what the words that you say. And then it's like, if that surprises us, then, should he not know, the one who has created? So one way to understand is, given that he is the one who has created, then it follows that he would then have that knowledge and awareness. Just as anything that, in sort of any man-made thing, when we create something, when we make something, we have an awareness of it, or an understanding of it, and we have an understanding of what is being produced by that particular thing, right? So a person people have created all sorts of obviously complex machines, etc., and the output, or if you like, what's happening with these machines, what they're up to, is something that we're aware of. So it's that kind of idea, basically. Since he has created, then therefore, he has an awareness or knowledge. Or you can simply just understand does he not know, who he has created or what he has created, basically. Yeah. So that's why the translation, his own creation. So yeah, so that's the first part. And then he mentions, as we know, it's very common in the Quran, Allah typically ends many verses with typically two of his qualities. So typically, two come together. In this case, a rarer kind of combination, although it still exists in a few places. وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. So actually, just quickly dealing with the second one first. Khabir is the one who is, all informed, if you like, all aware. A khabar, we know, is news. Even nowadays in modern Arabic, and even in other related languages, that word is used to describe the news, right, or what's going on. So the idea is that he has an awareness, okay, a knowledge and an understanding and awareness of everything that's taking place. And then you have this latif, and latif is a more, well, no pun intended, but it's a more subtle, mysterious kind of, sort of attribute, if you like. And it has maybe a couple of meanings. There's the idea of lutf as gentleness, a gentleness, and also latif as the one who is subtle. So what does that mean? It kind of means that, we can't always observe the way he works, even though the way he works is manifesting itself. So there's a lot that Allah does that is subtle, not known to us, right? But it's happening, but it's facilitating things. Things are going on. Things are happening. And actually, if you think about it on that level, actually, then it's something which is, one of his clearly it's not like some attributes or qualities which sometimes we only sometimes we only attribute certain qualities of his, like to certain incidents or certain moments in time, whereas this is one of those which is by definition, if you like, continuous, in the sense that if it relates to what he is up to, that is imperceptible to us. Yeah. And it's so there's constantly so much of that happening, and maybe there's sort of the two are related. So there's I don't know, sometimes when I think about this quality, it's this idea of gentle, subtle, and it's almost like I don't know, it's almost like as if things are in human context, it's like someone who does something with style almost. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like so you do it calmly, coolly. not everyone can know it or pay attention to it, whatever, but you're getting the job done, sort of thing.
Right.
You know. And it's kind of this idea. Obviously, now when we think about Allah Himself, it's like the idea is that He's doing everything so amazingly, so perfectly, you know, at so many multiple kind of levels, right? There's so many, any action that we observe, there's so much detail behind it, you know, which is imperceptible, also like physically imperceptible, and sometimes the stuff that we just don't even notice, even though it is noticeable. So yeah, it's powerful actually just to think about that, and to think about, and again, paired with the previous verse, it just gives us this deeper idea of just, again, that level of knowledge, the awareness, and just the nature of Allah, really.
Brilliant. Yes, I think as you were mentioning about that subtlety there, I think that what that reminded me of is like how we are making dua sometime and then we don't see the results of it. So if you believe in that nature, that Allah is gentle, He's kind to you, and is also subtle, that you know that every dua has an impact. You may not be able to observe it, but something is happening. So each time you're being consistent with your dua, day in and day out, things are moving forward, right? You may not be able to see it yet, but there's going to be a threshold when you actually start to see and how things are lining up for you. And so you mentioned about the Khabir part, connecting it to the back, you know, the previous one, that He's well aware of your intentions and your efforts. People might not be seeing the results, not appreciating what have you, but Allah knows it. He, you know, that's being recorded with Him, and He's actually mentioning it in terms in front of His angels, right? So you may not get a public mention and the whole, you know, the social cloud and whatnot, but hey, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one mighty, He's mentioning you, you know, if you will, liking, sharing, what have you, in front of His angels, subhanAllah. And from my work, especially in the Dawah scene, I think, you know, it's just dealing with that. There's a lot of the why people, right? Why has Allah obligated this, or why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated that, and why do we have to pray, and so on and so forth. And that connects with the first part of it, is that He's the one who knows, right? We can, you know, spend times and hours on figuring out the why. Okay, you know, should this be allowed or not? Is that better or not? Is that a good moral value or not? And we can keep debating it, and that's what we see in today's society, that you have, you know, polarized extreme for every topic, whether it be parenting, leadership, you know, investment, whatever you will, you have like extremes. So, and everybody is able to write books and books on their point of view. But then when it comes to, you know, following the deen and following, you know, the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, realizing that He knows and He's kind. So it's not a random order to show His authority, but that would actually lead us to be successful and more productive and more, so on and so forth. And yes, there's wisdom that we can research, but essentially it's realizing that these orders and commands and the boundaries are from the Creator Himself, who knows the creation best.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. No, it makes sense. And I think, I think that point you made about dua is important, because it's like trusting. Well, there's two levels. Like, first is trusting that you've been heard, and it's like trusting in the nature of the response, that the kind of the type of response and the timing of the response, you know, will be best for you, basically.
Yes, and that's actually an interesting point, right? That trusting that you have been heard, and then Khabir sort of helps you kind of connect to that and realize that he's well aware of what you're asking for, subhanAllah.
Yeah.
Good. Fantastic. Do you see any other examples that you have seen from any other case studies, like whether it be leadership or what have you, where people might be struggling with, you know, something they may feel like immediately doing and executing, where else, like, you know, having some sort of a dilemma about following the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and using those means compared to something that just, you know, seems very obvious and, you know, a quick route to something?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like these things always come up, right, in terms of the tension between something that feels maybe easier, more convenient, but it isn't as ideal, but it feels more immediate, versus versus perhaps what might be a slightly harder path, it seems, right, but one that might be more principled, more appropriate, more God conscious, and therefore, you know, it takes like some sort of we'll call it delayed gratification, patience, whatever you want to call it, right? Like to actually go down the right route, basically. And I think that's always in the context of leadership, in the context of life generally, like that's always a trade-off that we're all having to manage, right? Do I go for this apparent immediate sort of win, and in a way that seems easy and just, you know, within my grasp, but at the same time am I zooming out and thinking about what's the overall picture kind of here, and thinking again about the end point of where I'm trying to go and whether this actually is in the best interest of that end point. And that's just a constant sort of tussle that, you know, and a sort of an ongoing debate or discussion within a person that needs to keep happening, basically. So I think that the important thing here is just always to retain sort of perspective and remind yourself, like, ultimately what is it that you're actually trying to achieve and to do, and then to make your kind of small steps in such a way that they actually align with the big direction that you want to go in.
Brilliant. I think, yeah, and would you also say connected to, like, you know, sometimes people would say that, okay, look, if I'm pausing for Salah, or if I take that extra step and go and pray in Salah in the masjid, for example, then it may feel like you're taking away from your productivity, right? But then I think when it comes to, let's say, your coffee breaks, or, you know, any other sort of breaks, like, people generally accept that, okay, going on a walk is fine enough and it's actually not reducing my productivity. And you can see those things that, yes, it's not something you would see directly. Yes, I'm not in a business meeting or project meeting. I'm relatively going away from my project, but then these subtle impacts and that blessing that kicks in that will help you propel the project as well.
Yeah, no, it's good. Good examples. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, so in these kinds of examples where, you know, we just have to, it's just like the hierarchy of relationships that we have, you know. So we have relationships with different stakeholders in life, but the ultimate relationship is the one that we have with our Lord. And so it's like, what are we, you know, what's the order of those? Really, that's what it comes down to. Because it's not that people who struggle with, for example, some of these things like, you know, praying on time, etc., or scheduling their work, you know, in such a way that it doesn't interfere with these kinds of duties. Like, it's not that they don't have any connection with God, or it's not that they're not, you know, God conscious at any level. It's just, where does it fit in the order? You see? Yeah. So there might be people who, in the workplace, they won't pray consistently on time, but when they're at home, they will, right? So they are conscientious, they're just not conscientious enough, or haven't prioritized things in the appropriate way. So it's just a simple idea of, you know, putting Allah first, really, in all of the kind of decisions that we have to make, and then absolutely trusting that what will result from that is, you know, will be beneficial. And I think we all know this. Like, in the moment, these things feel difficult sometimes, but in hindsight, as I often ask people to think about, it's like, any time you ever made a sacrifice or you offered a prayer on time, you know, if you think about that now, like, do you regret that? You know, do you now, if you think about, like, do you regret ever praying on time before? Any prayer you've ever prayed on time? Like, no one regrets that, you know, because no one probably can think of something that resulted from that was just so terrible, right? Whereas, do you regret missing prayers, you know, because of whatever reasons? Could be laziness, could be fear of this or that, or, you know, you got consumed by other sort of things. That will be a source of regret. You will feel, oh yeah, you know what, I didn't do right there. I actually kind of failed to prioritize. So it's almost trying to think now about your future feeling when you think back to this moment. Like, how are you going to react in the future to your decision now? You know.
Good, brilliant. I think that's a brilliant point to us for us to end here on this topic, and then inshallah we'll see you guys in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum.